It is now my honor to present this year's Distinguished Leadership Award to Dr. Gabriel Demombynes, Charter Class of 1989. I reminded him when I met him earlier, again today, that we are in the picture from 1986 together, which is hard to believe. This annual award goes to two alumni who have made distinguished achievements or leadership contributions in their professional fields of endeavor, consistent with IMSA's mission. The awardees may also be recognized for significant civic or community contributions or for extraordinary courage and selflessness under challenging circumstances. As a senior economist in the Hanoi office of the World Bank, Dr. Demombynes works and publishes on poverty issues. He previously worked in Kenya and in the bank's Latin America and Caribbean division. He has led and authored a number of World Bank studies on topics such as inequality in Vietnam, poverty assessments for South Sudan, Nicaragua, Jamaica, Panama, and Honduras, collecting high-frequency data using mobile phones and impact on accountability and development, drug trafficking in Central America and beyond, and the invisible poor in Argentina. He also has published articles and chapters in various academic journals and books, including Canadian Journal of Development Studies, World Economics, Lancet, and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, just to name a few. Press coverage of his work includes the Washington Post, The Economist magazine, the Financial Times, Kenya's Daily Nation, and Reuters. He is perhaps best known for his work arguing for the greater use of scientific method in evaluating international development programs. Together with co-author Michael Clemens, he published a groundbreaking critique of the Millennium Villages Project, a high-profile rural development project implemented in several communities in sub-Saharan Africa. This summer, in a major speech in Nairobi, President Obama quoted Gabriel's writings as part of a study on employment in Kenya, noting that across the country, corruption costs Kenyans 250,000 jobs every year because every shilling that's paid as a bribe could be put into the pocket of somebody who's actually doing an honest day's work. Dr. Demombynes has taught economic development at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies and was economic policy advisor to Howard Dean during the 2003-2004 U.S. presidential campaign. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of California, Berkeley, and bachelor's degrees in civil and environmental engineering and in the Plan 2 Liberal Arts Honors Program from the University of Texas in Austin. Gabriel, for all you do to shed light on important, often urgent challenges of our time and to advance the human condition throughout the world, congratulations on your IMSA Board of Trustees Alumni Distinguished Leadership Award. Please join me now to receive this award.
Well, thank you, Sheila, for that tremendous introduction. And I would like to express my thanks for this great honor to the Board of Trustees. And I also want to thank my wife, sitting right here, and who endured a 24-hour plane trip from Vietnam with our two young daughters so that we could all be here today. So reflecting on my IMSA experience, I realize how much I owe to the charter faculty and staff, to Dr. Marshall, Dr. Veal, and above all to Leon Letterman, whose vision brought the IMSA from dream to reality. So looking back as an adult and putting myself in their shoes, I realize how much of a risk they took professionally, devoting themselves to IMSA when its future was so uncertain. I think you could probably say the same thing about the members of the charter class, but frankly, we were just very naive and had no idea what we were getting into. So let me take you back to year zero, day one at IMSA. What I will always remember from that day is the first thing I saw as we pulled into the parking lot. There was a big sign, it was sort of amidst the cornfields at the time. Amidst the cornfields, there was a big sign that said, "Future location of student dormitories." So that gave me some pause and did raise an obvious question. And so in preparing this short speech, I was trying to tell my 4-year-old daughter what it was like in terms of the living conditions our first year at IMSA. And she just had her first sleepover a few weeks ago. So I told her, well, it was kind of like a sleepover, but with about 120 people that I just met and lasting 8 months. So I had the joyous experience today of going back to revisit my bedroom from the first year, which is now, I think, the molecular biology room that I shared with about 30 other classmates. On that first day, Dr. Letterman gave a tremendously moving convocation speech. And in that speech, he ended the speech by saying that he wished us a gloriously happy, although primitive, year at IMSA. And I think that's a pretty good description of what that first year was like. In that speech, he went through, he traced out the whole history of humanity, starting with 1 million BC, talking about the development of science and then technology, and talking about our place as IMSA students in this grand story. And I think his charisma and his presence gave us confidence that we weren't completely crazy for being here. In 1988, when Dr. Letterman won his Nobel Prize, I was invited to a small reception that was given in his honor downtown. And when he spoke at that event, and then also at our graduation, he sounded similar themes about the duty we have as scientists to help make the world a better place. And so when I headed off to college the next year, this message stuck with me, and I didn't quite know what I was going to do in college, but I had the vague idea that I wanted to do something where I could take my math and science skills, which IMSA had nurtured, and do something to contribute to the greater good. After IMSA, the next key formative experience for me was my second year in college. I spent 3 weeks backpacking around Mexico, and that gave me a bit of an insight, a sense of what the world was beyond the U.S. borders. And it was tremendously formative for me because I realized for the first time that there's a great deal of poverty in the world outside the United States, and in the U.S. as well. I remember seeing miles and miles of shantytowns outside Mexico City, and that experience led me to think, well, what could I do to help reduce global poverty? And after that trip, I then decided to go on an exchange program to Argentina, and I spent a year in Argentina. And that experience in Argentina changed me in many ways. I think being immersed in another culture made me understand perspectives other than my own, and that gave me a capacity to put myself in the shoes of other people, which I think has served me very well in life and in my career. So after Argentina, I went off and I did a PhD in economics, and then landed my dream job at the World Bank. Now, just as I was starting at the bank, I was offered the position as economic advisor to Howard Dean, who was running for president at the time. So I was very, very passionate about the election that year, and so I quit my job at the World Bank after just a month. I think I have the shortest tenure ever of an employee at the World Bank. And we didn't win the election, but I don't think that was in any way due to the poor quality of economic advice that Howard Dean had. And then not long after the campaign ended, I was hired into a new job at the World Bank, which is where I've been ever since. So let me explain very briefly what the World Bank is, because I'm sure that's not familiar to most of you. So the mission of the World Bank is to end world poverty. It's quite a grandiose mission. We're not really a bank. We're actually an international organization like the United Nations, and we do two main things in our efforts to reduce world poverty. The first thing is to loan money to governments for development projects. So these projects can be all sorts of different things. They're often infrastructure projects, things like bridges and roads, but also education and health projects. Very broadly, the idea is to try and promote economic growth, which will then reduce world poverty. The second thing we do is to research the problems that developing countries face so that we can better understand their situation and give governments better policy advice. And that's really mostly what I do. I'm mostly a researcher. I'm not so much a money guy. So I really have a fantastic job, which has been very rewarding and has taken me from first living in Washington, where I worked on Latin America, and then living in Nairobi for 3 years, working on Kenya and South Sudan, and then the last 3 years in Vietnam. I want to end by describing very briefly 3 things that IMSA gave me that I think have been fundamental to the choices that I've made in my life. So the first is a sense of curiosity about the world. The way to excel in many professions is to specialize. It's to become the most knowledgeable person about a very particular area. And as I think you might have gotten from my introduction, I really haven't done that at all in my life. And I think I can blame all of my tremendous teachers at IMSA for that, because they didn't get me interested in just one thing, they got me interested in everything. And that sort of sense of curiosity is something that I've carried forward in my academic career and professional career. The second thing I took from IMSA is a belief in the power of scientific thinking. So I've been part of what's really a generational shift that's taken place among economists. This new generation has moved to use the scientific method much more in formulating development policy. And even now at the World Bank, my role is often, in meetings I go to, I'm often the guy who says, well, what do we actually know about this? What's the evidence we have for this? How can we test our hypotheses on the impact of this policy or this program? And I think this essentially scientific instinct I can trace back to my experience at IMSA. And then the third element of my IMSA experience that has stuck with me is this sense of duty that I took from Dr. Letterman, the idea that I should use my skills in a way that serves the greater good. So I'm very grateful to IMSA for all it has done for me, and extremely thankful for this great honor.